Well, Eric, getting things kicked off here this week, kind of wanting to start off with a lot of that severe weather that happened over in the kind of Midwest. Was watching the news, the live YouTube feed from some of those YouTube guys that are watching like kind of storm chasers slash YouTubers, just kind of keeping people
Yeah.
updated. And so like just yes, watching those tornadoes that swept through the Omaha area, northern to central Iowa area, kind of dropping a decent amount of precipitation for some areas. What do you have for a little bit of a recap for those storms, kind of on an impact wise as well as hydrological wise, trying to see and identify, constant updates for are we getting moisture to a lot of these key areas?
Well, some of the key areas we are. I mean, and it's helping that this big Bermuda high is pushing its way back into the southeast. That's just opening up this huge corridor, which it did on Sunday, to deliver a lot of moisture and instability. And that's why we saw just another day of just huge storms in the central U.S. And there they were kind of unzipping on this line. Now, this was Sunday afternoon, okay? We also had storms in the southeast, storms in the north. I mean, but what was amazing was watching these storms breathe in all of this smoke from the south as they matured throughout the afternoon and evening. Now, you're right, we saw a lot of severe weather out of this, and it was a pretty rough go. But before I show you that, though, I just want to make a point that since the start of this new month of May, we've been very dry north. In fact, Iowa, up until before this weekend, was very dry too. You did get some nice rain, though, over the weekend. But Dawson, I don't know if you saw this. I don't have it pulled up in my slides today, but do you see the huge dust storm that left Montana, went through North Dakota the other day? Like it was crazy. In fact, I'm gonna do this real quick. If I go over to X and go to my profile here and likes, there was a video. Actually, I retweeted it. Let me just go find you that one. Look at this video here. Um, that guy is in Minot, North Dakota, with that dust storm. He sent this to me directly, so I can show it to you. And if you look out when he starts the video again, he's got like 4 to 5 inches of dirt blown up against his tires, which is just incredible to see that. So that was all before this rain, and they needed all that rain. Let me shut that volume off there. So anyway, yeah, big storms came through here, and you're right, terrible tornadoes in parts of Nebraska, a lot of hail out of this. Very damaging event, but it's still like we're still looking at it going, all right, we still have a lot of drought to undo and a lot of very dry soil. And so there's still something to be discussed here as we go forward. And we're not out of any sort of a risk by any means in terms of more fires. We saw fires in Kansas to start the weekend. They were in Colorado in the middle of the weekend. There was a fire that was up in Minnesota over the weekend. And now we watched this area under critical risk today, coming out of New Mexico to Texas, Oklahoma, and southeast Kansas. But I think a lot of folks are going to be wondering, when's my next round of severe weather? So I just brought up the last 72 hours of severe storms, and all of these symbols you see here are different severe weather reports. But once again, Dawson, let me just show you this. I'll take all the precip and the reports off of there. This is just weekend hail. And there's a lot of newly planted crop in this area that just got hit with a lot of hail. And some of these storms over in Colorado piled the hail up 6 or 7 inches deep in the ground. It was just a whole bunch of little small hail. So this has been the year of hail, man. If I had to go back and think through something, we're not done yet. Storm Prediction Center today has a large area under a moderate risk in Kansas, parts of Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska. There is a significant tornado threat later on this afternoon we're going to have to pay attention to, but a broader severe wind threat. And yeah, once again, more hail. In fact, they just updated it. That's what that flash was. They didn't change this too much, no, but there's your hail risk going forward. Storm Prediction Center, along with the National Weather Service, we've got flood watches and warnings here, severe weather, severe storm watch there. This is all red flag warning, and on the backside, it's cold enough to give us a frost in this area. So don't forget, in that frost area, we were in the 90s last week. That's how quickly things have changed in the plains, just going forward here. All right, so let's get in and look at some of these storms. This was this morning storms. We're still watching these go midday today through parts of Indiana and Michigan. But what's left over here on the backside is just adding insult to injury over what's been an extremely wet spring in parts of Missouri. But what we're going to be watching is late this afternoon and this evening is this. It may not look like much on this image, but these are individual supercells this afternoon, this evening coming out of Kansas, getting into sections of Iowa, more of Missouri before this lines out into one big feature that kind of moves through Missouri in the overnight hours. The next day, we will be keeping an eye on storms, but it's much less organized than it currently is. So I just want to remind folks, keep an eye out today if you are in this area for the risk of strong to severe storms, if you're getting to catch this video before the storms start to light up. All right, bigger picture than that, just watch the rainfall, okay? This is just adding things up through Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I mean, we're only a week out in the forecast. And look at this rain we've got coming in here. And look at what's going on, in this area. Very, very heavy rainfall. And then the farther out I go into week two, do you notice where we're starting to fill in some of the gaps? Back here on the back side of this, there is increasing chances of seeing moisture in this area. And models they've been terrible at it. So I would just tell folks that if you are in this really dry area, yes, there is reason to believe there's more precipitation coming, but I would take all of the values there and cut them in half. I never trust model projections when we're under drought in certain areas. But we are expecting this. Now, the really wet conditions are going to be in through here, as you can see, this kind of particular region. And if we look at the chance of staying above a half inch, like who's going to be wet versus who's going to be dry, the wetter spots are the white spots in this. That's a big area of the country that's got good chances of rainfall. We're confining our driest conditions to the southwest and pockets of the northern plains into Canada. But on the wetter side of it, I mean, probability map getting an inch in the next 10 days. Look at this. This is the chance of getting 2 inches in the next 10 days. It's a lot of moisture in this open path coming from the Gulf, from the big expansive Bermuda High. And where you see from Texas through the Ohio River Valley, all that heavy rain, don't forget, we are still in drought in this area. So this rain could go a long way to helping to cure that spot. And Dawson, as you remember from a couple months ago, that heavy rain's hitting my Elvis rule, right? I mean, that's critical for later on this summer. Now, what we all want to know is later in the time period, do we develop any sort of a pattern to give us rain back in the plains? You've got to have a trough digging in here and ejecting. And sure enough, when we start to look out there around May 25th, 26th, 27th, there is a trough and it's doing this, and there's a big ridge out ahead of it. And that's why most of our week two forecasts, like the one from the European model, is beginning to increase chances of rain here, keeping it very wet across the south, but also bringing in rains to the mid-Atlantic. And what will be interesting to see, Dawson, is if we can build in higher and higher pressure around the Great Lakes, which would dry things out everywhere kind of to the north and east of that line and give us better rain chances to the south and west of it. That's what we're going to keep an eye on. Real quick on temperatures, since the beginning of the month, it's been quite chilly east of the Rocky Mountains. This just turned over warmer than average, though, simply because of how hot this end of last week into this weekend was. We had temperatures here touching 100 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's just flipped the script when you look at the averages. But there's a frost coming in there tomorrow morning. In fact, it looks like this. That's the temperatures for tomorrow morning. But we're pretty quickly going to move this around. So here's today's highs, tomorrow's. There's the front pressing east, clearing out the eastern United States. Heat comes back into the west, 100 degrees in Central Valley by Thursday into Friday. But then, honestly, Memorial Day weekend, I mean, that's Sunday. Could you ask for like a better look on temperatures for Memorial Day weekend? I'm going to be over in Indiana at the 500. This is a pretty good look overall at what the temperatures could be. Longer term, though, let's watch it again today, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Watch the cold air move east. There's Friday. Then we see the warm up this weekend. There it is, Sunday, Monday. And then after that, why is it so cool south? Rain. It's just rain. We're expecting rain down here. And so therefore it's staying cooler as we work all the way up to June 1st, which is how far our models reach right now. So Dawson, that's my next 2 weeks, kind of just looking at the bigger, broader picture of this. What are you thinking?
Yeah, kind of going back to just the generality of, chipping away at a lot of these key areas, which you've kind of showed that in just like the next 2 weeks of getting some better chances of moisture, in the plains, particularly the Texas Panhandle. I'm identifying, cotton areas as well as
Yeah.
going through the southeast up through the mid-Atlantic, still wanting to have chances at precipitation. And is that expected to kind of continue here moving forward, especially as we're still looking at El Nino, still looking at getting, supercharged for some of these anomalies that we're still looking at a little bit of an unprecedented time to see what does a super El Nino mean for this time period, as
Yeah.
well as kind of another question to kind of go on top of that as you mentioned a little bit that we were on the kind of on below average for temperatures, wanting to make sure that we're also getting a lot of this GDD accumulation as the growing season progresses. Do you see a little bit of a chance for that?
I agree with the Climate Prediction Center's prediction for basically the first 10, 12 days of June. Um, Mild for most of the country. There's a lot of reason to believe that. And given that we're moving into MJO phase 7, that tends to be in June a good precipitation maker for this part of the country. I wouldn't mind being drier in here. That would not be a problem. If we were drier and more mild, that's good for the crop early in June, so not necessarily a problem. So there's nothing really alarming about this forecast. But most of the models try to go back here by the time we get to the second half of June. So if you look at it, there's still a slight drier signal here with wetter conditions coming into the Four Corner states. But then a whole lot of this area is expected to be wetter than average going forward into the prediction time period based off the European model. Now, I don't trust these models. I told you that last week. I'm really skeptical of what they're doing, but we need to consider them as another point of reference going forward. So long story short, I'm not seeing June right now being this major risky month for this early developing crop. And I'm primarily focusing on the corn belt there. We've got to have the rains down south in the cotton belt. We've got to have rains back in the plains. Those are areas that we've discussed are already very vulnerable. So the rain forecast there is going to be critical. But my question is going to be primarily about corn belt stuff since we talk a lot about that region. All right, bigger picture. You talked about El Nino. This right here is a forecast, and those warmer colors suggest bigger and bigger what are called westerly wind bursts across the Pacific Ocean. Now, why we care so much about them is it's been these big westerly wind bursts that keep taking the ocean temperatures up and up across the equatorial Pacific. And we're still watching the same thing. Over the next 3 to 6 months, this warm water will be surfacing, giving us this chance at, as you mentioned, a Super Nino. Now, by the way, if someone's just watching us for the first time, like, what is a Super Nino? It's when the ocean temperatures here get above 3 degrees C above average. And right now, what's below the surface is 5 to 6 degrees Celsius above average. So we think it's going to surface and be quite warm. But I want to tell you something about how us meteorologists are looking at this. Some of us are really like, oh, is it going to be the biggest ever? A lot of us are like, I'm more concerned about the speed of which it's developed. And so I went back and I dug throughout history back to 1950, and I said, well, let's look at all these other El Nino and La Nina events. Because I want to know if the slope of this line right here at the very end, which is hard to see because it's all big compressed time series, I want to see if that slope taking us up into El Nino, which we all project to be, I don't know, I mean, way up here possibly. I wonder if that slope is the steepest. And so looking at all these La Nina events that became El Ninos, I graphed them out and found that 2026 is the fastest rate of change of ocean temperatures from February to May. That's just looking over that time period from February to May on the increasing side. So coming from La Nina into El Nino. And it's got a lot of folks concerned about what it's going to mean. But can I divert the concern for just a minute here? I think we give too much credit to El Nino on things. What I'm going to be watching is shown to you in this animation. And you and I have talked about this for years, Dawson. El Ninos, which form right here. Okay, this is back in March. You're watching a La Nina fade. These El Ninos that form are huge for fall and winter and spring. But in summer, we've got to watch this region here and this region here. And you know that. Gulf of Alaska, West Coast, that helps to determine how far to the north the jet stream is, how much momentum it has, and where it's going. And I'm just going to show you something really simple here. In fact, let's go back. Let's do a little drawing first, okay? If you looked at a box right here and another box right here, that box is maybe a little bit too big, but whatever. You're looking at the Midwest and you're looking at the Northeast Pacific. If you want to see what these two things look like when related to one another, I made a chart for it. What you see here is the Northeast Pacific July sea surface temperatures. So these are colder episodes, warmer, warmer, warmer. See how it goes? What I put on the bottom is precipitation in that box over the Midwest. And sure enough, when you see prolonged years of colder than normal ocean temperatures, most of those years were also drier. Not all, but most of them were. And then when it warms up, guess what? It gets wetter. When it cools off, yep, gets drier again. When it warms up, we get wetter. In fact, if you'd like to see it, this is the map that tells you the whole story. I've got in the top left, warm Northeast Pacific, the top 15 warmest. Where were they wet? Right in through here. When it's cool in the Northeast Pacific, where were they wet? West. It was dry in through here. And when you take the difference between the two maps, it just shows you how important it is to pay attention to the Northeast Pacific temperatures because the correlation coefficient is 0.4. And that's high enough to use as a predictor. El Nino's correlation is below zero point 0.3. So that's why we have to care about this as well. So I show you all of that, and this is the map I want people to remember. But I also just want to come back here and say, when the Climate Prediction Center later today releases, I think it's today or maybe it's tomorrow, when they release their newest long range forecast, I'm going to imagine that they're going to put high pressure just off the west coast of North America, where that warm water is currently residing, showing an increased chance of precipitation here. Now, that's the heart of summer and probably not hot either. They're going to predict heat west, drought painting the corners, northwest, southeast, active southwest monsoon, but storms in the upper Midwest. I really do think that's what they're going to say later on when they release their report. What I'm curious about, though, is why the models look like this right now. And again, I've really questioned the modeling at this point. I don't really see too strong of a signal other than really active southwest monsoon, but it's certainly not like what my analogs would suggest this summer's going to be, or what a warm Northeast Pacific would deliver. So Dawson, that's kind of it. I mean, the Super El Nino is important, but it's not the only player in town.
Yeah, I mean that does bring up that good point of we've been discussing this for a couple years now at this point because
Yeah.
I still go back to the summer where May was looking really good for an El Nino. What was that, 2023?
2023, yeah, we did have a big El Nino in summer
Yeah,
2023, but yeah, May and then May showed up dry, didn't it?
yeah. So identifying those different parts that's like, yeah, El Nino can tend to be good for, crop production in general for these higher years, but yeah, looking at those other parts of the ocean temperatures of to where at this point you probably can't definitively say, are we going to have a drought issue here in the US or at least for the Midwest or Corn Belt areas? Still some things up in there here moving forward.
Yeah, this is all about using this analysis to tilt the odds in one direction or the other, right? We come in knowing what summers can do, but we're just trying to figure out which side of average are we going to be on. And all I'm trying to say is if this up here develops a big area of blue by the time we get to June 15th, oh man, we'll be talking about heat and drought in the Midwest. If it doesn't, I don't know where that heat and drought signal is going to come from, until you get late into summer. My analysis was only for July. I mean, you could still have problems late in the summer, but right now we're trying to look at the middle of summer. And July is the critical month for corn and soybeans. I mean, it really is July and August. So
Um,
that's why I decided to analyze those months.
Yeah, definitely. So keep an eye on ocean temperatures, not just El Nino here moving forward.
Yep.
Going to be watching to see how these next storm systems shape up here for the U.S. Kind of seeing if we can chip away at some of these drier areas that have, been sitting in some droughty areas for, some past the past few months now at this point, trying to get some alleviation for, as we mentioned, the plains, southeast, looking up at the mid-Atlantic, and just continuing to push this crop along here in the Corn Belt. But I think that's going to conclude our talk for today. Eric, always appreciate your insights and talk next time.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.